So let's talk about the formal process. Now, this is a little bit of a harsh reality here. So as I mentioned earlier, every role that gets posted, there's an average of 1,000 people who apply. And for companies like your Googles, your Amazons, your Apples, it's going to be even like way north of that. Most companies have some form of applicant tracking software to weed those 1,000 applicants to only about 50. What that software does is it scans the content of your resume for keywords and matches them to the job description. So a company is looking for a 100% match to their job. The more content in your resume that matches job description, the higher your resume gets ranked and the higher your odds of it being seen by like an actual human being. So if your resume does get in front of human eyes, that individual will spend only 5 to 10 seconds reviewing it. I know it sucks and it's unfortunate, but it's kind of the harsh reality of what they're dealing with. Now, so those like 1,000 applicants go through this like digital Hunger Games until there's like 50. Those 50 remaining need to get cut down by HR to about maybe 20 people. From that pool of 20 candidates, 3 to 5 will get chosen to interview. And, you know, obviously there can be only one for the job. So what do you do? Here are a few things that will immediately improve your chances. The first thing you should understand is that your resume is a functional object, okay? The goal of a resume is to convey information. It's not a portfolio piece. Now, don't get me wrong. Your resume should absolutely be beautifully designed, but it's not a showcase of your work. Like no images, no pictures of you, avoid data visualizations, no logos or personal brand identities. Like you shouldn't have those to begin with. Just clearly and beautifully convey the information that you need to. Secondly, it needs to be like keyword rich. Now, remember I said that HR is looking for like 100% match to the job description? They really mean that. I talk to a lot of executive recruiters and that comes up regularly. People with marketing backgrounds apply for brand leadership roles. Project managers want the UX job. Agency side wants to go in-house and so forth. Not that it can't be done. Whatever your background is though, your resume needs to very clearly illustrate the relevant experience that you can do the job. Just very clearly, it needs to illustrate that you can do the job. Read the job description, like really break it down line by line. Like I'll copy it over into like a Google Doc and like go through it. Understand what they're asking for and like highlight some of the key things. If the word strategy or customer focus pops up a few times, they're probably looking for that. If the role leads teams in like a few parts of the world, like global should feature heavily on your resume. If it's a corporate role, things like cross-functional leadership and executive presence should appear somewhere in your language. Now, if you're not sure about how to like write about yourself, good pro tip, go to LinkedIn. Find some leaders that you admire and see how they present themselves. That doesn't mean you should steal their language, but understand the mechanics about how these executives talk about themselves and their work. I mean, if you're an individual hiring for a role on your team, like you really need to be involved in the process. Like be very clear about the requirements, the expectations, and the outcomes of the position you're trying to fill. And the third thing, and this was actually like a game-changing piece of insight for me, I got from this guy named Laszlo Bach. He was the senior vice president for HR at Google. He had this formula for how to talk about your accomplishments, which is awesome. It's X by Y equals Z. So if you remember anything from this chat, remember this. I accomplished X by doing Y, and the result was Z. Very often when people talk about themselves on a resume, it's unfortunate that it's like a simple list of what you did and not the value that provided or even a frame of reference. Like here's an example of something I would see all the time. Quote unquote, developed a design system. All right, look, you and I all know like those things are really hard to do. Like I've done a bunch of them, like they're such a Promethean task, but that bullet point really doesn't do anything for the reader. A good way to say that would be something like, created and implemented a design system that streamlined productivity and increased cost savings. Yet an even better way to say that would be something like, increased cost savings by $150,000 and improved productivity by 22%. developing and implementing a global design system. Like, do you understand the difference between those two things? Like, one is a to-do list and the other shows value and provides a frame of reference. It's like, remember, X by Y equals Z. And whenever you can, include things like job dimensions, range and level of responsibilities, staff size, budgeting, reporting relationships, outcomes, cost savings, value generation. Any of those things are awesome to have on your resume. And as best practices, you will never know when you're going to need your resume, like cover letter, references, any of those things, like have multiple copies. Like personally, I got one on my laptop, one on my Google Drive, a copy on my phone. You can now store one on LinkedIn. I mean, heck, even Voldemort backed up his work in multiple places. Just do it. Like it'll save you a headache down the road. Okay. All right, Adam, do you feel that insight was helpful?
Yes, and I also feel like I need to reread Harry Potter. Is that a book 7 reference? Or no, it's like the entire Horcrux thing, right?
I'm sure a bunch of people from the chat are going to chime in right now.
Yeah. No, I did just have like a thought. Is there a general, so you mentioned like basically beef up the resume as much as you can so that it gets through to the human. But there are also a lot of opinions on like resume length and like try to condense it, make it longer. Is there any like general cadence that people should try to keep in mind for if you're going for like a head roll? Is there a rule for length? What is too long? What is too short?
Okay, going back to like they are going to look at it for a couple seconds, so it's a matter about how the information is conveyed. Like that'll be, I guess, high level point. The more senior role, 7 to 10 years per page. You know, like there is no need for your resume to be more than 2 pages, like really. And you should be adept enough to be able to design the information in a way that conveys the salient details. I like to break it down. Well, like I think editorial design is a really good model for the resume. Like you'll have your headline, which is usually whatever the role is. Then you'll have 1 or 2 bullet points, which is like your big statement about who you are and what you do. Some soft skills, and then you're going to go right into your like what your last role and kind of everything that's going on. Like way down below that, education, like knowledge of software, or any of those things. Like they really want to know what your last job is and how you provide value to that. Those are the big things. And how you differentiate yourself. That's where that headline comes in.
Cool. If I can jump in, a lot of people are sending in private messages, understandably, considering that the topic is a little sensitive. But we had quite a few people saying, you know, like 2 pages, 3 pages, some interesting, to back up what you were saying earlier is like it took some help maybe to tell that story. People are mentioning hiring writers. There was an interesting, or another quick question on here about like, do you need PDF resumes these days, or is LinkedIn enough? Do you have any thoughts on that? And if anyone else has thoughts on that, please send it in.
LinkedIn is backup information. Like don't print out your LinkedIn profile to PDF. Like don't do that. Your resume, and the higher you go, the more that information you kind of don't want public. Like on my resume, there's like a lot of stuff I've done for GE that can only go on the resume, where I talk about specific numbers and percentages and value driven and stuff like that. Like that's not on my LinkedIn profile. Your LinkedIn adds color. They will look at that. They will look at all your social profiles, and they will look at everything and make a very quick judgment on you. But your resume should have the salient details that are tailored to the job you're applying for.